What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Only Football Podcast. My name is Kyle, and today's been a little bit of scramble brain for me. Um, Obviously, Tim Patrick, if you haven't heard, he goes down with an Achilles injury and he's going to be out for the entire season. That bothered me a lot. Now, you can trace Bronco wide receiver injury problems back like a while now. We had Cortland Sutton miss an entire year. Then we finally were like, oh, we're getting everybody back together. And then Tim Patrick goes down on the first day of pads last year with an ACL and misses the entire season. And then today, the first padded practice of the 2023 season, he goes down with an Achilles injury. Very, very frustrating. You get Sean Payton in, Russell Wilson trying to have a bounce back year. You just want to see all the weapons on the field. And that one bothered me probably easily the most. The Broncos also waived Hamler after he had a diagnosis of pericarditis. Pericarditis, excuse my ignorance. It was some kind of inflammation going on around the heart, and it's a mild heart irritation. He's expected to miss weeks and not months, but definitely for the receiver room, a bad day to be a Denver Broncos fan. And I thought about going live Friday because Jonathan Taylor has requested a trade. And with all the NFL running back news going on right now, I wanted to make sure it was clear that this was not a small deal. I know maybe some casual fans out there may think that Jonathan Taylor is the 2020 version of David Johnson, who had a really good year fantasy wise. And then the next year, he just, the guy just became a ghost, basically, disappeared from the NFL. I do not think that he is the David Johnson. We got Bill in the chat, which always makes me happy. What's going on, Bill? Said, sorry for your Broncos. And, it is what it is. Now, I don't know if you guys were following the year that Jonathan Taylor had, I think, like 1,800 yards rushing. I believe he led the NFL in 2021. I can easily verify that really quick. But man, Jonathan Taylor was good. I mean, he was really, really good for the Colts. So, I mean, you got a rookie quarterback out there. You're in one of those positions where you can pay your quarterback or your running back. We know that there's a lot of teams out there that have paid their quarterbacks, whether they're tier one or tier two. It's gotten to the point now where even tier two quarterbacks can make $40 million a year. And now that we're living in that kind of a world where we pay, $50 million a year for our quarterback, then we spend the second most amount of money protecting his blind side. Shout out to Sandra Bullock and the blind side. And then you spend the third most money usually rushing the quarterback. So on your defense. So, I mean, running backs have just kind of continued to fall on the priority scale, and you're seeing it again. And I wanted to say, by the way, Bill, I saw that Rich Eisen replied to your tweet. I showed my girlfriend. We had a great time with that. That is so cool. I love just to know that he actually looks at his tweets, because there's a lot of people that just tweet and then, they forget about it. They don't go through their replies or anything like that, probably for their mental health. But Rich Eisen, a guy that looks at the comments, good to know for everybody. And Bill said Eisen did a whole segment on the JT thing, and it's worth a watch. It's gotten to the point now where tier two quarterbacks can make 40 million. And I took that personally. I knew right when I said it that was going to I'm not talking about Daniel Jones, but maybe I am a little bit, but not only him. But Rich Eisen, I love his show because he always, to me, does a full breakdown. He talks about, he's a great balance between opinion and news. What is fact? He can read the temperature of the NFL very well because he's been surrounded around the NFL for 20, 30 years. Um, he's just he knows what he's talking about. He doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. He's just going to tell you how it is. And when I look at the running back situation going on right now, I had to take a step back myself. You know that I've been saying, okay, Saquon Barkley needs to get paid. Josh Jacobs, he needs to get paid. Jonathan Taylor needs to get paid. Why? Because we got Daniel Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Anthony Richardson. So those teams need to pay their running backs. Now, I did a little research today, and this is what I meant when I say I've been a little scattered today, because I spent the last 2 days writing an article, and I'm turning it into a documentary about the running back position. And I decided to do a sneak preview because I have been, going really hard on this. Like, you might see something that takes, one paragraph to write, but it's so loaded with research that it may have taken 20 minutes, to find all that just for one paragraph. Getting more into the journalism side of sports, I can appreciate a one-page segment. I understand that one-page segment may have taken 3 days to write because of the amount of information that is put in there. So what I did was I wanted to start a documentary with the running back situation. Obviously, the game's changed a lot. So I started in 2015. To me, that was a really good year to switch because we were already moving in the direction of a high powered offense, right? 2 years before that, Manning threw 55 touchdown passes in one season. But at the same time, in 2015, the Super Bowl winning team, the Denver Broncos, won because of their defense and not their offense. It's a very balanced year to pick. Excuse me. So that is the year that I went with. And this is what I want to read this before I go into that. Bill said Irsay needs to be taken out behind the woodshed with this non-football injury shit. Dirty pool man. And you also saw him tweet about the CBL, and he said, "Oh, it took a lot of hours and a lot of dedication and work from people to come into an agreement." And then he said that the agents of these running backs were the primary reason that things weren't going well because their agents were giving them false hope, right? So he's basically calling out the agent saying, "Hey man, stop telling your star running back he can make this or he can make that because it's false hope." Well, that agent then tweeted out a response to Jim Irsay saying, "Good faith is paying your best players offensively." So I mean, it was like shots fired, right? Um, so I mean, this whole thing is kind of a mess right now. Like I said, like 3 weeks ago, I would not be shocked if we do see some kind of running back strike this season. I know that there are going to be players that do not participate. I know Travis Etienne went on the record about the running back thing and said, he's still himself trying to prove that he's one of the best in the league. This isn't a year that he can afford to sit out. And if we learned anything from Le'Veon Bell, is sitting out 1 year can literally break your entire career. So people are going to play. Not everyone's going to hold out, but there may be a situation where, the top 5 running backs, 5 of the top 10 are not playing this year. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But the reason I wrote this segment on running backs, I wanted to go into this with an open mind. I tend to be very for the best players getting paid, and almost to the point where I can be at a fault because an honest person would, say, well, not every deal is a good deal. So where is the balance? Well, I wanted to write this article out, not being on the ownership or the general manager side, and I definitely am not against the players either. I just want to see what does history say about paying your running backs. And I'm not talking about just, I can already tell you right now that there hasn't been a team that's won a Super Bowl with a number one rusher or the highest paid. Very, very frequently is the highest paid running back the best performing running back, which is a total, another concern. We won't even dive into that, but I want to see what does the stats say. Okay, so in 2015, I'm only doing the top 3 leading rushers, and I'm doing the 3 highest players, okay? So which players are being paid the highest, which players performed the highest in 2015. In 2015, and ultimately, what did their high performance do to the team that they were on? Did it take a team to a Super Bowl? Whatever. So in 2015, the top 3 leading rushers was Adrian Peterson, Doug Martin, and Todd Gurley. Adrian Peterson was also the highest paid running back in the league with a salary of $13 million. He ran for 1,485 yards and averaged 4.5 yards a carry. He had 327 attempts, which the other 2 running backs on this list, second and third place, they didn't even have over 300 attempts. So Adrian Peterson was the bell cow. He was the Minnesota Vikings. He was the heart and soul of their team. And if there's any, younger people that end up following this channel, just know that Adrian Peterson is the best running back that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Somebody turning 30, in about a year from now. Adrian Peterson was different, and it's really easy to, want to go for these new guys, but man, what Adrian Peterson did and how frequently he did it. I mean, year after year after year. I haven't seen anything like it. Number 2 was Doug Martin. Doug Martin ran for 1,402 yards, and he averaged 4.9 yards a carry. He was being paid $1.3 million by the Tampa Bay Bucks, by the way. And number 3 was Todd Gurley. And if you played fantasy football, then you know that Todd Gurley was really good around this time. And he was making $8.7 million. He ran for 1,100 yards. Okay. So who were the highest paid running backs during that time? Well, we already said Adrian Peterson was. Okay. Matt Forte. Matt Forte was the second highest paid running back in 2015. And Arian Foster was the third highest paid running back. Now, because we're talking about the highest paid running backs per year, I am going to give a little more analytical information just so we can associate high paid running back equals what type of season. So Matt Forte's Bears went 6-10. They finished last in the NFC South, and Forte only had 898 rushing yards. Okay. Arian Foster, Houston, they went 9-7. They were first in the AFC South. They lost in the wild card round and played, he had 163 yards. So the wild card round they lost, but Arian Foster, when you really look at his career year to year, there are some running backs that you can clearly see it was a mistake to pay. And then you have running backs that are in the middle. They're not a team that won a Super Bowl, but the team itself had a winning record. It went to the playoffs, may have lost a playoff game, may have won a playoff game, but you have successful running back, high paid running back, and you're in the postseason. Now, that's up to the viewer to decide, is that success? And I guess it depends what your franchise like. If you haven't seen the playoffs in 15 years, then that would be success. If you're, the Kansas City Chiefs, that is not success. So the overall goal is something worth keeping in mind. Now, let's talk about Matt Forte for a second. Matt Forte's best year, the Bears' best year with Matt Forte, not Matt Forte's best year, but what was the Bears' best year with Matt Forte at running back? 2010. He was the 15th leading rusher. He had 1,069 yards. He had 547 yards receiving. Matt Forte made $470,000 in 2010. And the Bears played the Packers in the NFC Championship game. Forte was not a Pro Bowler. No. The Bears Pro Bowlers consisted of Devin Hester, Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, and Julius Peppers, all household names, and most of them on the defensive side of the ball. So, the Bears definitely had a strong defense, but that was Forte's best season, or the Bears' best season, right? Because we're not just talking about what was the player's best season. What works for franchises? Okay, so is there a trend of teams being good when they're only paying their running backs $470,000? Maybe. Why? I don't know. Maybe they can, go out in free agency and spend money on, Julius Peppers or whatnot, right? So just keep that in the back of your head. Forte had 70 yards rushing and 90 yards receiving in the NFC Championship game. 0 touchdowns. Jay Cutler, during this time, just for frame of reference, was the 12th highest paid quarterback. In his first season with the Bears, it was 2009. He was making $17 million. And the Bears had the 19th ranked offense in points. Not a strong offense in Jay Cutler's first year. In the 2010 season, so the next year, the Bears' best season with Forte, the Bears' offense would go down to the 21st ranked offense. So they were 19th, and then now they're at 21st. But this year they went to the NFC Championship. So what gives? Well, the Bears made the NFC Championship because after the 2009 season, the Bears fired defensive coordinator Bob Babicki and hired Ron Marinelli. So a change in personnel at the defensive coordinator position. They added Julius Peppers along with drafting outside linebacker Brian Ewu, cornerback Tim Jennings, safety Chris Harris, all defense. And the Bears had the 4th ranked defense in 2010, and it was that defense that took the Bears to the NFC Championship. And because of that season, Forte would receive his big money after the 2011 season, and he would sign a 4-year, $30.4 million contract. And in Forte's 4 years, 2012, he rushed for 1,094 yards. The Bears went 10-6. In 2013, he rushed for 1,339 yards, and the Bears went 8-8. So that right there is his best rushing season, almost 1,400 yards, and the Bears went 500. 2014, he rushed for 1,038 yards. The Bears went 5-11. And then in 2015, he rushed for 898 yards, and the Bears went 6-10. Not once in the 4-year window from paying Forte did the Bears go to the playoffs. Not one time. Okay. And that's just Matt Forte. Adrian Peterson, I just we'll talk about him, but he's so well known. It's almost not even, I want to get to the guys that we may have not remembered. Like, was that a good move? Was it a bad move? Arian Foster. Arian Foster in 2015 was the 3rd highest paid running back in the NFL. And in 2016, homeboy retired. 2009 to 2011, Foster signed a 3-year, $1 million rookie contract. So 2009 to 2011, that's when Arian Foster came in. He signed a 1-year deal in the 2011 season, right when his rookie contract expired. By the way, 3 years for $1 million, that's a really cheap contract. 2011, he signed a 1-year deal that was worth $525,000. I looked up a Bleacher Report. It was an article written all the way back in 2011, and this article was ranking the top 50 running backs before the 2011 season started. So the Packers win the Super Bowl. We're in the offseason. Bleacher Report comes out with an article just trying to give you the temperature of what it was like in the league during this time. And Arian Foster would be playing for a contract. He was ranked 12th on that article. So Arian Foster, because he only signed a 1-year deal worth $525,000, this was a contract year for him. However, Bleacher Report already had him ranked the 12th best running back in the league. And this list, consisted of guys like the Frank Gores and I could go on and on, but it's like, can you? I can, but this list had some very good running backs on it. So 12th wasn't that bad. This is what the article said. No one could have projected what Foster would go on to accomplish last season. Coming out of nowhere to have a season like that is unheard of. Foster is a great all-around player. He's a fantastic receiver on deep, short routes and excels once he reaches the open field. He is quite fast and he plays with solid instincts. I don't expect that same success out of Foster in 2011, but he should have a nice season as the Texans hope to finally get a playoff berth. Well, the part of that article that said the same success, they don't think he will find the same success, they're referring to Foster's 2010 season, a season he led the league in rushing yards with 1,616, led the league, and he had 16 touchdowns, led the league in touchdowns too. So in 2010, on that, I mean, this is just crazy. He was still on his rookie contract, and he was leading the league, and they still only gave him $525,000 and said, "Do it again." Okay, so that to me is kind of like, oh man, what a dick move. Like, you paid me $525,000 on a prove it deal, and I led the league in rushing yards and touchdowns, and then you still give me another 1-year prove it deal. That's not, that's kind of messed up. Well, here's what happened. Okay, the a season he had led the league in rushing yards and touchdowns. Okay, we covered that. Okay, he only played 13 games due to a hamstring injury during the season that he led the league. I was going to skip that, but I don't want to skip that because it even shows you that he was even more special, right? And that stat would be even crazier if I didn't see that the second leading rusher was Jamal Charles, and Jamal Charles rushed for nearly 1,500 yards, and he only had 6 starts and was averaging 6.4 yards per carry in the same year. That's a total sidebar. I was going to skip it and I can't. That is insane. But still, 13 games, 1,600 yards, we're rolling. Well, the next year, Foster played the entire 16-game season on that $500,000 deal. He ran for 1,224 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. The Texans won a playoff game against the Bengals in the wild card round. The Texans would lose in the divisional round. However, Arian Foster earned himself a 5-year, $43.5 million contract from 2012 to 2016, right? And that's why when we were on the year 2015, Arian Foster was the 3rd highest paid running back. But what happened in between him getting paid in 2015? Because we know he retired in 2016, right? And the answer to that is whether the deal was good or not, ultimately, right? So in 2012, which was Foster's first year being paid real money, the Texans went 12-4, and Arian Foster had a year, a league high 15 rushing touchdowns, 1,424 rushing yards, and he was selected to the Pro Bowl. The Texans had the 8th ranked offense in points, led by Matt Schaub, but it was the defense that was responsible for beating the Bengals in the wild card round. I had to rewatch this game. This was insane. The Bengals had -6 passing yards in the first half. -6 in a playoff game. And I thought that would be the lowest of all time. This game was in 2012, and it said lowest since 2007. I was like, really? It's that recent that someone else went in like with -10 passing yards? I mean, crazy. So they had -6 passing yards in the first half. Arian Foster was responsible for the only offensive touchdown in this entire game. Okay. So I mean that means something, right? Um, and it was a defensive slugfest, right? The Texans went on to lose to the Patriots in the divisional round in 2013. So 2012's in the books. It was a good year. They made the playoffs. Your star running back scored the only touchdown in your playoff win. He had over almost 1,500 yards. I mean, it's a solid year. Okay, so in 2013, a back injury would limit Foster to just 8 games, and the Texans would go 2-14. They drafted Jadeveon Clowney with the first overall pick, and they brought in a new regime with head coach Bill O'Brien. Before this, they had Gary Kubiak. Now, Gary Kubiak is a really good coach, and that's why the Texans were, they might not have had the talent to go to the Super Bowl, but they had a squad. They really did. I mean, growing up, my dad worked as a golf pro, and his buddy that he worked with, his name's Ryan Walter. His brother, Kevin Walter, was the receiver for the Texans during this time. Number 83, Kevin Walter. So, I mean, this was a really fun time for my life because I got to meet all the players. I got to play catch with them. I got a football signed. It was awesome. And, I was never a Texans fan, but it was a team that I would cheer for. If they weren't playing the Broncos or the Packers, I would 100% cheer for them. And they were fun to watch, man. They had that tight end. I'm blanking on his name right now. And they had a squad. So they got a running game. They got good receivers. Matt Schaub was thrown for over 4,000 yards. I mean, they were doing their thing, okay? But after going 2-14, everybody wants a change. So they draft Jadeveon Clowney. Bill O'Brien comes in. Bill O'Brien had some success. The Texans would go 9-7, and Arian Foster would play only 13 games in the 2014 season. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of injuries here. We're not seeing a playoff berth. He did have 1,200 yards rushing, and he did get selected to the Pro Bowl. So I don't want to make it sound like he was a bum. It's not that. It's just worth noting that. Okay, the next year, Foster would tear his Achilles in just week 4, and he would miss the season. And in comes Lamar Miller, who would take the torch, and the Miami Dolphins would acquire the running back from the Houston Texans. So he was having good seasons, but they won one playoff game. So, I mean, was it a good deal? Was it a bad deal? It's up to the person. Let me finish, and then you can make your decision. Okay. So the Dolphins would acquire the veteran running back in 2016. Arian Foster played just 4 games, and then he announced his retirement. Following a Week 7 victory over the Buffalo Bills, I had to look for this. He went on, I believe, the I Am podcast, something like that. And he was talking about his retirement because, I guess I didn't fully appreciate how abrupt his retirement was at the time. And now looking back on it, it's like, dude, he was like dealing with some injuries, and then he missed, he missed games in almost every, in that 4-year contract that he signed, he missed games every single year, and and they got worse and worse and worse. And then they replaced him. And right when you're expecting, okay, well, this dude's going to ball, he's going to go over to Miami, and Arian Foster is going to ball out. This guy arose for Miami, Jay Ajayi. And if you don't remember him, he totally went off. Now, he didn't say that played a role in his retirement, but, imagine being beat up, your body destroyed, and then you see a fresh pair of legs, and this guy's running for, over 100 yards a game, and you just know that you can't recover as quick as him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, especially when I have what he actually said. And this is what he said. When I was a kid, I asked my dad, how did you know when you didn't want to play anymore? You wanted to walk away. How did you know? And he told me one time, and I'll never forget, he said, and we were playing, I believe the Browns or the Steelers, and I was battling some small injuries and nicks and stuff. And I was standing on the sideline, and right before we went into halftime, it's just a vivid thought that at the same time, I was reading this book by Brian Greene, who's a psychiatrist. And I was really getting into this book. And I remember thinking, I was looking up at the stands and I thought vividly, I was like, I do not give a shit who wins this game. Like, I do not care at all. I just want to go home and read my book. I want to finish reading my book. I would rather do that right now. And that's the thought that ran through my mind once that crossed my mind. I was like, it's time to leave. So there is a little bit of, emotionally disconnected from the game at this point. Getting replaced will probably do that to you. And then, and then he did it. He really went in and he talked to Coach Adam Gase at the time. He went into his office and he told him how he felt. And he said, listen, I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste my time. I don't play a position where you can half-heartedly just kind of fake the funk. Like, I could get hurt or someone else could get hurt. Coach said, take a couple days. I appreciate you talking to me about it. Take a couple days and you can come back. If you still feel like that, we'll rock with you. I did. I took a couple days. I got on one of those boats on a little river thing. I enjoyed my 2 days and I came back. I was like, that was the worst thing I could have done. I'm definitely done. And since retiring, Foster's done a little bit of everything. He's hosted his own podcast called Now What for a while before co-hosting Macrodosing with Barstool. He's worked his way into the music industry, and he's even appeared on an episode of MTV's The Challenge. But just like that, man, just like that, the dude's gone. And to me, it's really crazy to see some of these players, man, they are peaking, and then all of a sudden they're just gone. And the craziest part was when I looked at the other running backs, like Adrian Peterson. Peterson was on a 3-year, $42 million contract with the Vikings. He included $20 million guaranteed and an average annual salary of $14 million. In 2016, Minnesota went 8-8. They were third in the North. They missed the playoffs. And in 2017, Peterson went down on the 12th carry of the night, week 2 against the Packers on Sunday Night Football, and he was out for the season. These are the decisions that have to be made. When you really take it down a list of the highest paid players at the position and you go year to year, you really see how many of these guys just get so many injuries. Let's talk about Jonathan Stewart, because Jonathan Stewart is on the list. Jonathan Stewart was the running back for the Carolina Panthers. So in 2016, you had very similar situations. You had Adrian Peterson, you had Jonathan Stewart, and you had Doug Martin. Those were the highest paid running backs in 2016. The best running backs in 2016 were Zeke, was it Legarius Blunt, and David Johnson, who we talked about earlier. Those were the best 3 running backs in 2016. The highest paid was Doug Martin, Jonathan Stewart, and Adrian Peterson. But Doug Martin, we talked about that in 2015. I put down who were the top 3 leading rushers. Doug Martin was number 2, right behind Adrian Peterson, but he was only making $1.3 million. So clearly he got paid. He got paid, and we're going to see how that worked out. We're also going to see about Jonathan Stewart, because Jonathan Stewart was the second highest paid running back in 2016. And to understand Jonathan Stewart, we are going to have to talk about DeAngelo Williams just a little bit. Let me make sure this is plugged in. We're going to have to talk about DeAngelo Williams just a little bit, because their careers did kind of intertwine. Okay, so Adrian Peterson, we will talk about him at the way end. He's special. Jonathan Stewart, he played 13 games for 824 yards in 2016. The Panthers went 6-10. Stewart was drafted in 2008, okay, to give you a timeline. And he started just 13 games under his rookie contract. From 2008 to 2012, Jonathan Stewart started only 13 football games. Now, that stat is very misleading because Jonathan Stewart took advantage of his opportunities and he went off in his first. I'm going to get to that. Okay. So, in his first year under his new contract in 2012, let's actually start even further at the top. Okay. From 2008 to 2012, the Panthers were really impressed, and it was enough to offer him a 5-year, $36.5 million contract. The Panthers wanted to have 2 capable running backs, and DeAngelo Williams was 2 years ahead of Jonathan Stewart. So in Stewart's first year under his new contract in 2012, Stewart would rush for just 336 yards and go 7-9. It was really the evolution of Cam Newton that would improve this team drastically in the future. So that was 2012. In 2013, Jonathan Stewart's second year under his big money contract, the Panthers went 12-4 and finished first in the NFC South. Stewart, however, would start just one game the entire season, and he rushed for only 180 yards. So you see, he got his money. The first 2 years are complete disasters. The fans are probably pissed, all of that, but you just can't prevent some of this stuff. So due to starting just one game, Stewart was obviously injured in 2013. But what may be less obvious was that he was injured in December. This is what blew my mind, because when you're not reading an article and you're truly writing all this down, when I saw that Jonathan Stewart started one game, I thought for sure that he was hurt, probably week 1, if I had to guess. You don't just pay somebody, a 5-year, $36.5 million contract and not play them. But the real reason his stats were terrible in 2013 was because Jonathan Stewart was behind DeAngelo Williams, who started 15 games and rushed for over 800 yards, which isn't remarkable, but we had at this point already seen stuff from DeAngelo Williams that was really good. Okay, so Stewart's big contract in 2012 was proving to be a bad business decision. An article released shortly after the 2013 December injury further made the point that the deal was bad for business by stating, over Stewart's first 2 NFL seasons, he ran for 20 touchdowns. In the 4 years since, Stewart has 7 on the ground. 2014 would need to be a major bounce back season. But was it? In 2014, Stewart ran for 809 yards and less than 1,000 all-purpose yards, because I know some of you might be like, well, he was really involved in the passing game. Still, all-purpose yards, less than 1,000, and the Panthers running back was ranked 22nd in the league while being paid the 10th highest. Okay, so 2008 to 2012, he was on a 5-year, $20 million contract. 2012 to 2017, he's on the 5-year, $36.5 million contract. But 2011 to 2015, right kind of in the middle of all this, There was a 5-year, $43 million deal signed by DeAngelo Williams, which made him the sixth highest paid running back in 2011, which was wild because in 2010, Jonathan Stewart had the better year. Okay, Williams had 361 rushing yards, while Jonathan Stewart had 770. Williams played behind the Panthers starting running back Deshaun Foster from 2006 to 2007. And Williams had combined 1,217 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns during that 2-season stretch. So the Panthers basically, when Williams got drafted, before there was even any kind of Jonathan Stewart, to talk about, he was, on a pitch count. They would throw DeAngelo Williams in and see what he can do. And in the 2 years, he had over 1,200 combined rushing yards. So they were like, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's start him and let's see what he's made out of. Okay. So the Panthers were a mediocre team that averaged 8 wins per year in DeAngelo Williams' first 2 seasons in the NFL. Consequently, they missed the postseason for the 10th time in their 13-year existence. When DeAngelo Williams took over the starting running back duties in 2008, though, Carolina turned the corner. Williams had 1,515 rushing yards and a league-leading 18 rushing touchdowns that helped the Panthers duplicate their franchise best 12-win, 4-loss record in the 2008 NFL campaign. So for the Panthers, and this we're talking 2008, we do see the Panthers organization turning a corner from where they were losing, 10 out of 13 years, and now they're starting to win, and there is a running back responsible for it. So this is good for running backs. But how did it ultimately end for DeAngelo Williams? That is really whether this will be considered a good or bad thing. I'm going to hit the comments really quick. We got Steve in the chat saying Konnichiwa. Bill saying 2012 was a good year. Just saying, the year that, the world almost ended, we were all having a blast. And Steve said, Foster has never been the same since he left Freeze. They made the best banana splits. Just saying. And Bill was saying, sometimes you just know when you're done. And then went on to say, think about it. You got $20 million in the bank. How long do you really have to keep getting your ass kicked 17 weekends in a row? And yeah, I mean, no fault at all. Like when you're done, you're done. And I can totally get down with that. So going to DeAngelo Williams and the way things went after he helped that team turn the corner. Okay. It didn't go great. I'll just start with that. Okay. The Arizona Cardinals ended the Panthers' memorable season with a resounding 33-13 victory in the 2008 NFC divisional round. But DeAngelo Williams earned his first and only Pro Bowl nod at the season's end. Okay. So you're understanding the timeline. Carolina has a very capable, this is their Adrian Peterson before Jonathan Stewart ever became a Panther. They already had their, Adrian Peterson. So they lose that game, okay? DeAngelo Williams goes to the Pro Bowl. Everything's feeling good. In 2009, with Williams being the clear number 1 running back in Carolina, it was a surprising year. Surprising because Williams had 1,117 yards rushing in 13 games. But it was Jonathan Stewart who took advantage of his opportunities. Stewart only started the 3 games Williams had to sit out, but he did play in all 16. And he led the team in rushing yards, 1,113, and touchdowns with 10. Unfortunately, he suffered a torn Achilles in week 17 against Atlanta in 2009, and he would, be ready for the next year. So I guess if it's going to happen, at least it happened week 17. I could not confirm this to save my life. I was watching the week 17 highlights between the Panthers and the Falcons, and they don't have the full game, and the highlights don't show Jonathan Stewart going down with an Achilles. But if you look up Jonathan Stewart's career injuries, it says that he got an Achilles injury in this week 17 game. And then when you go to the next season, week 1, you do see that it looks like they have him on a pitch count. But I still was struggling to fully confirm that. Okay. But I don't think it matters that much, to be honest. The Panthers finished the season at just 8-8 the next year in 2009 and missed the playoffs. But suddenly they had two top 10 running backs. They named this duo Double Trouble. And I believe they got their name against Tampa Bay. And it was like both running backs were just going off. Okay. So this was a really, good problem to have, is that the running back duo would go into the 2010 season as a serious double threat. And they were paid like that. They were the 12th and 13th highest paid running backs. And for Williams, it was a contract year. So 2009, Panthers 8-8, missed the playoffs. Going into 2010, they missed the playoffs. But the bright side is now we have two, maybe top 5 running backs. This is how the Panthers feel. If we have two top 5 running backs, like we're in great shape, right? So there was reason to be optimistic. They're both paid 12th and 13th highest, but for DeAngelo Williams, he's got to do really good this year. And there can't be too much of a ball carry share, because he needed to have a great year because he was in a contract season. Well, the 2010 season was a disaster for DeAngelo Williams. He sustained a mid-foot sprain during a Week 7 game against the 49ers, and Williams' injury forced him to sit out the Panthers' next 10 games. So in comes Jonathan Stewart. Unfortunately, he had a head injury of his own, and he didn't have the same success he had filling in for Williams in 2010 that he had in 2009, because we know in 2009 he went off when he got the opportunity. It wasn't like that in 2010, unfortunately, for Jonathan Stewart. But the Panthers, regardless of the last 2 disappointing seasons, they decided that they would pay Williams in good faith a 5-year, $43 million contract. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, okay, DeAngelo Williams, he's been really good. And I think you get to that point where you believe in somebody to a point where even like we got running backs now that are leading the league in rushing yards on a contract year and not getting a contract. This is like you getting hurt, showing, that maybe you're not as durable as you were when you were younger. And then missing, games in the last 2 seasons. And then they give you a 5-year, $43 million contract. That is like really good faith. But did it work out for the Panthers? Was it a good decision? It was definitely good for DeAngelo Williams, but was it good for the Panthers? Well, this new contract made Williams the 6th highest paid running back in 2011, right behind Frank Gore. So yeah, Frank Gore was right there at number 5, and Frank Gore's, Hall of Famer. So the 2010 Panthers, though, would go 2-14 and secure the number 1 overall pick in the 2011 draft. And the Cam Newton era begins. So you do have 2 teams that coincidentally, like in the same, 1-2 years, had paid their running back, and also had the first overall pick. Now, I'm not saying that if you pay your running back, you're going to be the worst. I'm just looking at the patterns and seeing what story they're really telling. Okay. So now, okay, DeAngelo Williams, he's got his money. He can't believe it, right? His bank account just got $43 million in it. What's going to happen now? It's the Cam Newton era. Okay, so in 2011, the Panthers give their highest paid running back, who is now DeAngelo Williams, the most opportunities, 155 carries for 836 yards. While Jonathan Stewart wasn't far behind with 142 carries for 761 yards, they were definitely using them complementary to each other. The Panthers went 6-10 though, and both of the running backs had a mediocre season. It wasn't even one of them that, was like, oh my God, that was a good. I'm not saying that rushing for 800 and 700 yards is, anybody can do it. I'm not. But when we're talking about top 5 money, you gotta at least be cracking the 1,000-yard mark. I mean, at least. You should be getting close to 1,500 if you're a top 5 running back. My top 5 running backs would all go for between 15 and 2,000 yards. I mean, that would be the expectation, right? So I did write mediocre because I do think that this is, um, yeah, I expect more out of them. They're both in their prime. One of them just got paid. The other one's working on getting more money. So they have the mediocre year. They go 6-10. That's Cam Newton's first year, and they finish with the 21st ranked rushing attack. And I wrote not good enough for the 6th and 18th highest paid running backs. But Cam Newton's development is what would help Carolina take strides in 2012. In 2012, Williams was the 5th highest paid running back in the NFL, and Cam Newton actually had more rushing yards than DeAngelo Williams. And this year, he did play in all 16 games, but he still only had 737 rushing yards. Cam Newton had 741. And Stewart would get just 336 yards on the ground. The Panthers went 9-7, which they are getting better. We got to keep an eye on that. But they did miss the playoffs. Regardless, the Panthers, like Williams, have seen enough of Jonathan Stewart. So Jonathan Stewart, he went off his first 2 years. Like I said earlier, 20 touchdowns, thousands of yards. And now here we are. You paid DeAngelo Williams, and then you're getting, this running quarterback that is literally outrunning your highest paid running back. And Jonathan Stewart's getting 336 yards on the season. And you go into the offseason and go, we're going to pay him. The Panthers are a very good example of, being generous to your running backs, right? Because they could have been like, we don't need you anymore. But in their eyes, they were like, no, the more ball players that we have, the merrier. Okay. So the contract was on the light side with Jonathan Stewart. He only made $3 million in 2013. And that's why in 2016, when you look at the highest paid running backs, Jonathan Stewart is number 3, because a lot of his money on his contract was on the back end. So he wasn't making, a ton of money right off the bat, but the money was there. And in 2013, the Panthers got rolling 12-4, first in the NFC South. Stewart started just 1 game under his new contract. Another disappointment. And DeAngelo Williams had 843 yards. He was this 22nd best running back in the NFL. Not great. So, I mean, I'm seeing a trend here. You pay people, they get hurt. They're on a contract year, they get hurt. I mean, there's just a lot of injuries here. So, but the team is getting better. But it's because Cam Newton's getting better, not necessarily because of this dangerous running game that, these two are having, because the numbers don't show that they're doing things that, a 6th round draft pick can't do. I'm not seeing anything. Like, you show me Adrian Peterson's 2012 season where he ran for the 2nd most rushing yards ever, right? I think right under Eric Dickerson, over 2,000 rushing yards. That is what, those are the type of generational talents that you pay. But in the moment, right? This is all hindsight. So we can look back on this and be like, oh, they shouldn't have paid Williams. They definitely should, not have given Jonathan Stewart all that money. Jonathan Stewart was the league leading rusher, and then it's like Josh Jacobs is the league leading rusher. And there may be a running back in today that wants to be paid that will eventually say, if they don't get paid, that was a good decision. Whether it's right or wrong, taking morals and ethics completely out of this conversation, if, we're just going off how it goes for teams paying their running backs, a lot of the time it doesn't go well. But there are running backs that I think you should pay. So they pay Jonathan Stewart. He misses the entire season, unfortunately. And then, so from 2011 to 2014, Williams had only, this is the part that's going to blow your mind. I was thinking of how to word this to give it the biggest impact, because it is one of those stats that's insane. Okay. So in 2013, once they got rolling, Stewart's would start only one game, but they went 12-4. So it tells you that even if, Jonathan Stewart wasn't there, they still improved a ton and made the playoffs and were first in their division. The following year, 2014, was Williams' last season as a Panther. So that's how quick it happened. It was just not that long ago, DeAngelo Williams was being paid, and he still had another year in his contract. And the Panthers were like, don't even worry about it, dude. Like we'll just trade you. So how did he do? Okay, so he got his contract in 2011. He missed all of 2010. The Panthers gave him a contract from 2011 to 2014. Williams had only 529 more rushing yards in that 4-year span than Adrian Peterson had in just 2012 alone. Wow. The Panthers were good again, though, but it wasn't due to an exceptional running attack. Like I said, Williams had just 210 yards, and Jonathan Stewart had 849 yards, and that was 22nd among running backs. So you got Williams and Jonathan Stewart taking turns at being 22nd. And the one season Jonathan Stewart made the Pro Bowl, it was in 2015, but he still did not pass the 1,000 rushing yard mark. The Panthers did represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, so that definitely will, attract some Pro Bowl nods and stuff like that. But I think Jonathan Stewart would go into the 2016 season thinking, okay, I gotta ball out because I'm the second highest paid running back in the NFL, and I haven't proven anything. And he retired. He gets traded to the Miami Dolphins, and that's it. So I mean, when you look at just the example of the Panthers, didn't need to pay their running backs. They had reasons not to, but they were used to being bad for so long that I think they associated the little bit of success that they were having with their running backs. So they were willing to do whatever it takes to not be bad again. And if that means paying both of our running backs, I mean, they missed so many games, and both of them were definitely a disappointment. And the third running back was Doug Martin. Doug Martin was on his rookie deal. He goes in second place. Doug Martin was on a contract year as well. He was second in 2015. So in 2016, they paid him. In 2015, Doug Martin was the second NFL leading rusher with 1,402 yards. Perfect timing for Doug to ball out during the last year of his rookie contract. His only other season he cracked 1,000-yard rushing mark was in his rookie year in 2012. And 2012 would ultimately be the best season that Doug Martin ever had, which is like a very Zeke thing to happen, right? When the 23-year-old rushed for 1,454 yards, almost rushed for 1,500 yards his rookie season at 23 years old. Doug Martin, because he was the second NFL leading rusher, he signed a 5-year, $35.75 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that included a $15 million signing bonus. Doug Martin would play in only 8 games in 2016. So they paid him. They gave him some real money, and he played in only 8 games in 2016. The third highest paid running back played in 8 games. He had less than 500 yards. He had 421 yards on the ground. Tampa went 9-7. And you might be thinking, well, that's just 2016. Well, in 2017, Doug started just 8 games again, but he had 421 or 406 rushing yards that season, and Tampa went 5-11. So this contract is a total disaster. Nothing good has happened since this contract got signed. And in 2018, Tampa got rid of the running back and he would play his last season in the NFL with the then Oakland Raiders. And he had just over 700 yards before the Raiders would draft Josh Jacobs, and Doug Martin would never play in the NFL again. 3 years after being the third highest paid running back in the NFL, he's gone. Now, I'm going to leave the rest for like a very formal documentary because I do want to go, okay, so now we did 2016. Now 2017, who are the leading rushers? Who are the highest paid running backs? Okay. And we're going to keep going. But I got to say, the way it looked when I first, started glancing at this, it was not running back friendly. And I would love to hear what your guys' opinion is because, of course, there's always an exception to the rule, and there are running back contracts that do work out. Adrian Peterson, like I said, I was going to save it for the end. Adrian Peterson's contract worked out. I mean, no, they didn't win a Super Bowl, but Adrian Peterson was the best running back in the NFL, and the Vikings were able to secure him for the best years of his career. A person that would go on to have a lot of one-year contracts with different teams. Minnesota squeezed the most juice out of Adrian Peterson, and that is very important, right? Localize your best talent on the field and try to retain it as long as you can. So I have no problem with Minnesota paying Adrian Peterson, even though they never won a Super Bowl, right? So the Adrian Peterson's best season, like I mentioned, was in 2012, and the Vikings went 10-6 that season and missed the playoffs. So do you do it? Do you not do it? We don't have enough right now. All we know is that the 2015 and 2016 highest paid running backs did not, equal anything special. And now here's what I did want to add, because what's really important is to keep track of the trends of what teams are spending their most money on, but not just any team. Like, I don't care what, a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 10 years, I don't care what they're spending their money on. Give me the Super Bowl teams. What did they spend their money on? Well, in 2015, the Super Bowl winning team was the Denver Broncos. They had two running backs, Ronnie Hillman and CJ Anderson. Ronnie Hillman ran for 863 yards. CJ Anderson ran for 720. Ronnie Hillman averaged 4.2 yards a carry. CJ Anderson had 4.7 yards a carry. So you got 770,000, almost 600,000. What did they actually spend their money on? Okay. Well, the percentage of the salary cap in 2015 that the Denver Broncos spent at the running back position was 1.36% of the cap, and easily the lowest amount spent at the position. What did they spend the money on? Denver had the secondary at the highest. 16.52% of the salary cap was spent on the defense, and that was the famous no-fly zone. Chris Harris Jr., Aqib Talib, TJ Ward. I mean, it was an amazing thing, right? So the second thing that they spent the most amount of money on is the offensive line. They did 16.39% of their salary cap on the offensive line. Then they did 16.14% of the salary cap on the linebackers. Then the receiver at 15.31%. And then finally the quarterback at 12.71%. And that was Manning, who was on a 2000 and I believe it was a 5-year, $94 million contract, something like that. But you only have one quarterback. All these other positions, right? You got to pay your backup. But, so I think that's why quarterback was so low. But you look at these 16.3, 16.14, 15, and then you look at running back 1.36. This is a team that won the Super Bowl. And usually you hear people say like, oh, well, if you're going to win with defense, then you have to have a complementary running game to go with it. I mean, Denver did. They could run the ball. They had two running backs that were together rushing for around 1,400 yards, and they won the Super Bowl. Who did they play? The Panthers. The Panthers spent 6.41% of their salary cap at the running back position, as we know, right? With the running backs that they have. Quarterback was 10%, center was 7.9, running back though 6.41. So the Panthers, did I don't want to say spend a lot of money on running backs, but the money was there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go, okay, 2016 highest paid running backs, 2016 best performing running backs. I'm not going to read the article, but I'm going to give you the names. In 2016, it was Ezekiel Elliott, Legarius Blunt, and David Johnson. In 2017, it was Le'Veon Bell, LaShawn McCoy, and Melvin Gordon. In 2018, it was Elliott, Barkley, and David Johnson. In 2019, Derrick Henry, Elliott, and Chubb. In 2020, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Josh Jacobs. 2021, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon. And in 2022, last year, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, and I threw Saquon Barkley in there for a fourth, just for you, Bill. But we're going to break all those down. And it's crazy. Like, I can see my bias because I go through here and I'm like, oh, Matt Forte, Arian Foster. It's been long enough that I don't feel, anything besides they paid the wrong guy, right? But when I go up here to the top and I go Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, I can see the hypocrisy from me. I look at these names and I think you got to pay all of them besides Ezekiel Elliott. These are all running backs that should be, paid top 10 money. But a couple of these running backs are not going to pan out for the teams that pay them. And all you can do as a fan is hope that your team isn't the one that gets screwed. So we're going to keep this thing rolling, and I'm going to turn it into like a running back documentary. I would love to keep reading the different ones, but I want to save it for the video. And I think that this is going to be well received in the football community because I'm not, on any side. I'm just pursuing, truth and what has happened. And I'm going to make the video, with the video editing. I want it to look like something that you could put on your TV and sit down, and the production value is something that, you like, right? So definitely stay tuned for that. I did also want to mention that I am going to Wisconsin tomorrow. I leave at like 11. My uncle's getting married. So I am going to be going live tomorrow to talk about football, more football things. I couldn't get to the top 50, right? The top 100 players. They sent out another 10 players. So I want to go over those, talk about different injuries, different teams. NFL training camp, everyone's wearing pads. There's a lot of stuff to talk about right now. Aaron Rodgers firing shots back at Nathaniel Hackett. Back at Sean Payton. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. He defended his quarterback, but we'll bring it up. So tomorrow I'm going to go live because I'm going to be flying on Wednesday. So definitely be ready for a surprise episode tomorrow. And we got Mile High in here. And he goes, Tim Patrick should just call it a career. Yeah, man. And I hope not. I would hate to see him go out like this. Like he had a great year. He was underrated. He didn't, fit on anybody's, 52-man roster. He kept working, hustling. He had the best hands on our team easily. He was the first receiver that was a true number one receiver, probably since Demaryius Thomas. Courtland Sutton had, a couple years, but he also had a couple, down years. So Tim Patrick was, to me, kind of like the glue that's going to keep the Denver Broncos receiving core being consistent. And I would hate to see him go out injury after injury like that. I still think he's got a lot to prove, but can he muster up the emotional fortitude to start this rehab process all over? Imagine you just got yourself back, you get your helmet, you're wearing your cleats, and then somebody comes over and says, "Hey, we're going to restart the entire process." We're going to find out. And I don't blame him if he feels like, he can't do that. Steve said, do people even have TVs anymore? All I see are zombies staring at cell phones everywhere. They used to socialize around TVs, but now they just wander around aimlessly looking down and getting run over. Yeah, and we're going to see a lot of that at the airport tomorrow. The airport's my favorite. I like to stand still when I see somebody on their phone. I like to stand still. Like clearly I'm in their path, but let's say I'm like 40 feet in front of them. So I see them, they don't see me. I just stop and I see if they run into me or not. And it's really funny because they get like right next to you and they're just like, and then I'll move out of the way. Or it's like a game of chicken. And I'm like, well, I don't want to actually hit them. I was hoping they would just notice me and be like, holy shit, I should stop staring at my phone so much and pay attention to my surroundings. But they don't. And I move out of the way and life continues the same way it was before I stood still for no reason. And Bill said, he said, I thought we were talking running backs, not wide receivers. So I got a bit confused about the Tim Patrick. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of new comments in here now. It scrolled all the way to the bottom, and man, shout out to Mile High, by the way. Mile High being in here, mad love, mad love. I'm a huge Denver Broncos fan, and I follow your channel, and I really appreciate you coming in here. Totally made my night, along with Bill and Steve being here too. But that's going to be today's episode. Tomorrow, be looking out for another episode. We're going to go through some NFL stuff. And yeah, man, thank you for staying up and enjoying this podcast. Thank you for being here and listening to it. And I can't wait to see you. Man, why do I got flies on me? I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. So Bill, Steve, Mile High, you guys have a great night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. See ya!